From Studio 1Z, with the latest news, commentary, and weather, it's the KZRG Morning News Watch on Newstalk, KZRG.
It's FM 102.9, 105.9, AM 1310. And on your smart speaker, it's Newstalk KZRG, Ted Bojorquez and Steve Scott. And joining us this morning is Jared Young, who's running for Missouri U.S. Senate. How you doing this morning, Jared?
I'm doing great.
Hey, well, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
Now, Jared, for those that are unfamiliar with you, introduce yourself. Give us a little bit about your background and why it is you're running for U.S. Senate.
Yeah, so name's Jared Young. I live in Webb City, Missouri. I am a lawyer by training, but a businessman by trade. Spent the last 10 years running a business here in Southwest Missouri. Father of 6 children. I've been married for 16 years. And didn't grow up in Missouri necessarily, but I moved all around the country growing up, so I've actually lived in Missouri longer than I've lived anywhere else in my life.
Nice. It's Jared Young here at Newstalk KZRG running for Missouri U.S. Senate. And Jared, what makes you kind of an interesting candidate is you're running as an independent, right?
That's correct.
Now, I have to ask, why? Why not running as a Republican? Why not running as a Democrat? Why an independent?
Yeah, good question. Obviously one that I get asked a lot because running as an independent is not an easy path. I got into politics, decided to make the leap because I believe our two-party system is completely broken. And so my goal is not just to become a U.S. Senator, but it's to significantly improve the way that Washington works. And I believe that can only be accomplished as an independent right now. There are so many people that go to Washington with good intentions, intending, I'm going to drain the swamp, I'm going to fix the system. What they discover is after they've gone through a campaign where they've depended on the party for everything to get them to that seat, the pressure to conform in Washington is incredibly intense. And if they want to keep their job, they have to toe the party line. So I think if anyone wants to be a true difference maker in Washington, it can't be done within the two-party system right now. So that's why I'm running as an independent.
Sort of an idea of like you can't put out the fire from within the house type thing.
Exactly.
It's Jared Young running for Missouri U.S. Senate here at Newstalk KZRG. Jared, if you are elected and become Missouri's next U.S. Senator, what would your top priorities be? And what would you do or what rather would be your goal in achieving those priorities?
Yeah, so there are a number of areas where I feel like the American people actually have pretty broad consensus, and there are solutions out there that are reachable, but we're not reaching those solutions because of partisan warfare and partisan bickering. One of those areas is immigration. That'd be one of my top priorities. I believe it's entirely possible for us to have an immigration policy where the border is actually secure. So what we have right now is unacceptable. We have millions of people coming across the border that we don't know exactly who they are. We don't know why they're here. So we have to tighten up security, do reforms to make that happen. But at the same time, legal immigrants are an incredibly important part of our economy and an important part of our history. And so I also believe we need policy that will help us bring more hardworking, America-loving people to the country to fill up jobs that need to be filled up. With the baby boomers retiring, with people not having as many babies now, we just are facing a demographic reality where if we want the economy to grow in the way that we want it to grow, we're going to need those bodies. And so those are the two sides of the immigration coin that I feel like each party is focused on one side, but it's entirely possible for us to hit policy that hits both of those sides. So immigration is number one. Our national finances are another. And this is an area where both parties seem to have kind of completely stopped talking about fiscal responsibility. And there are a number of impacts of us driving up the national debt and just blow out government spending. There are long-term impacts where it's compromising our future ability to do things, but there are also short-term impacts like the inflation that's killing us all right now. So national finances would be my number 2 priority. Number 3 is actually national security. And this is an area, I would consider myself conservative. I've voted Republican most of my life. This is an area where I really break from where the Republican Party is going right now. I believe strongly that, the peace through strength that used to be the Republican mantra in years gone by. I believe strongly that we should support Ukraine, we should support Israel, we should support Taiwan, that if we don't support them now with our money and our resources, we will end up down the road having to support them with our blood. And that's not anywhere any of us want to go.
It's Jared Young here at Newstalk KZRG, running for Missouri U.S. Senate as an independent. And Jared, I'm glad you brought up those two topics, because my next question is, right now the Senate, they are looking at a lot of issues of consequential importance. And while the Senate maybe not literally, but functionally is basically split right down the middle right now between Democrat and Republican. And when it comes to immigration, Ukraine war funding, the war in Gaza, and gun rights, those are kind of really the big ones that people are worried about. If elected to Missouri, or as the next U.S. Missouri U.S. Senate rather, where would you likely vote on those? Would you likely lean towards Democrat vote on Ukraine war funding? Would you likely lean more towards the Republican ideology on there? Where do you think you'd fall?
Yeah, so it obviously depends on the issue. On some of these issues, these are the issues where I say probably break with where the Republican Party is going right now. There are Republicans that still support these issues, but I think they're becoming the minority. So if we're talking about Ukraine funding, I would vote in support of Ukraine funding and supporting them in pushing back Vladimir Putin and that authoritarian regime. If we're talking about immigration reform, I would have voted in favor of the reform package that was put forth several months ago. I feel like that gave Republicans a lot of what they'd been asking for a long time, and they were pretty much on board with it until President Trump came in and said, no. We need this issue to be able to use it during election season, so don't give Biden a win here. I think that's the wrong way to think about it. I think we should be looking for wins for America, and tightening our border right now is a win for America. And so I was really disappointed when the Republicans killed that. What was the other one you asked?
The war in Gaza and Israel.
That's an area where I have a much more nuanced view. My undergrad is actually in Middle East studies in Arabic. I lived in the Middle East for a while, so I have a pretty detailed and nuanced understanding of the history that's gone on there. But I believe we have a duty to help Israel. They're an ally. I believe that they have a right to retaliate against Hamas for the atrocities that were committed on October 7th. So I believe we need to support them. But I also recognize it's a tragedy anytime innocents are killed. And that's certainly happening in Gaza right now. And the thing I think we need to be holding Israel accountable for is not telling them how to perform this war, not telling them they need to do a ceasefire, but rather holding them accountable for what the plan for the day after is. What is the plan for making sure that history doesn't continue to repeat itself in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict? I don't feel like Israel has a clear plan right now, and that's where we should be applying American pressure.
Mm-hmm. It's Jared Young running for Missouri U.S. Senate as an independent here on Newstalk KZRG. Now, Jared, I'm sure you get this question all the time as an independent, but I'm curious on what areas politically do you feel you align closest with Republicans, and what areas politically do you feel you align closest with Democrats?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because, like I say, I voted Republican most of my life, and so I consider myself a conservative. And so, the areas where I'm obviously still aligned with where the Republicans are right now are areas like abortion. I'm pro-life. I guess I'm a moderate pro-lifer. I'm in favor of a 15-week ban with exceptions for rape and incest and when the life of the mother is in danger. When we talk about transgender issues, I'm opposed to transition surgeries in minors and cross-sex hormone treatments in minors. I'm opposed to biological males participating in women's sports. So a lot of the cultural issues like that, when you talk about guns, I'm a gun owner. I believe in Second Amendment rights and protecting those. Also open to reasonable reforms that could potentially keep guns out of the hands of people that shouldn't have them. So I think we need to be open to those conversations. So those are areas where I would say I lean conservative. Areas where I guess I align more with Democrats now aren't areas that I would consider being liberal. Again, I align more with some of the more traditional Republican positions. National security is one of those. We've already talked about that. The Democrats have come out as the party in favor of funding Ukraine and strengthening our allies. I'm in favor of that. Immigration, when I talk about being in favor of legal immigration, that somehow seems to have become a Democratic issue. Again, I think Republicans in days gone by would have supported that issue. And so I can't think of any areas where I would say I lean liberal, but there are certainly areas where I align more with today's Democrats than I do with today's Republicans.
Mm-hmm. It's Jared Young. He's running for Missouri U.S. Senate as an independent. Jared, we're up against the clock here, but I know you have an event coming up today. Is that right?
That's right. This evening in Joplin. It's at the Sterling Event Center at 7 p.m. You can come hear from some people involved in the campaign, get a free T-shirt, free food. We would love to have as many people there as possible.
Hey, free's always good, right?
Absolutely.
And finally, Jared Young, running for Missouri U.S. Senate here on Newstalk KZRG. If you had one final elevator pitch, so to speak, for those listening as to why they should vote for you for Missouri U.S. Senate, what would that pitch be?
We all love to complain about how Congress is dysfunctional, broken, they don't get anything done, but we rarely actually do anything about it. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. So if you send a Republican to the Senate, nothing will change about the way things work in Washington. If you send a Democrat to the Senate, nothing will change about the way things work in Washington. You have a chance in me to actually affect the way things work in Washington. So I invite you to do that.
It's Jared Young, running for Missouri U.S. Senate here on Newstalk KZRG. Oh, and Jared, socials. If people want to learn more, where do they go?
Yeah, Vote Jared Young is the handle. That's JaredYoung. Vote Jared Young.
And that's on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook?
Yeah, every social media outlet, yeah.
Excellent. It's Jared Young, running for Missouri U.S. Senate here on Newstalk KZRG. Jared, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
It's Newstalk KZRG.